Have you ever wondered why your motivation seems to evaporate by midweek, leaving your carefully crafted vision board gathering dust? If your answer is yes, you're not alone, and it's not your fault. The conventional wisdom on motivation relies heavily on fleeting moments of inspiration that simply cannot sustain you through daily friction, distractions, and fatigue. What you truly need isn't another burst of temporary inspiration, but a reliable, battle-tested system that makes motivation automatic, something resilient enough to carry you forward, even when you're overwhelmed, exhausted, or tempted to quit. Instantly 10x your motivation, the anti-vision switch presents precisely this kind of transformative approach. By combining your aspirational goals with an unconventional but powerful concept, the anti-vision, this book guides you in building a robust motivational system that doesn't rely on the fickleness of willpower. Inside, you'll uncover practical strategies that convert motivation from an unpredictable emotion into a dependable habit. You'll learn how to permanently eliminate decision fatigue, design environments that make positive actions effortless, and establish a clear, vivid anti-vision of outcomes you're determined to avoid. With this dual-driven system, you will build unstoppable momentum and consistently deliver your best, even on your toughest days. This book offers not just ideas, but a comprehensive toolkit, simple yet potent methods, clear frameworks, and actionable techniques designed to fit seamlessly into your daily life. Whether you've struggled with consistency or felt overwhelmed by setbacks, instantly 10x your motivation empowers you to reclaim control and turn motivational slumps into lasting success. Your journey toward relentless, unwavering motivation starts here. Welcome to a new way forward. Chapter 1. Flip the switch. The notification glows mockingly on your phone. Weekly review, 2 of 11 priorities completed. 2 weeks ago, those same 11 items felt urgent, life-changing, non-negotiable. Now they're digital fossils in your task manager, buried under newer, shinier distractions that will suffer the same fate. You stare at the ceiling, replaying the same question that's haunted ambitious builders for decades. Why can't I just execute consistently? Here's the brutal truth. You've been sold a lie about motivation. The self-help industrial complex wants you to believe that success comes from finding your passion, visualizing your dreams, and waiting for inspiration to strike. That's why your Monday motivation dies by Wednesday. That's why your vision board collects dust while your competitors eat your lunch. This chapter will flip the switch on everything you think you know about getting things done. You'll discover why vision-only plans collapse, how to build an unbreakable floor under your ambitions, and why the most successful founders, creators, and leaders don't rely on willpower. They rely on systems that make action inevitable. The vision trap that's killing your progress. Picture this. You craft the perfect vision statement. You can taste the success. You feel the energy surge through your veins. You're going to change everything, starting tomorrow. By Wednesday, you're back to scrolling social media during work hours. Sound familiar? You're not broken. You're just running on a single engine when you need two. Vision-only plans collapse because willpower is a finite resource. Research from Stanford shows that decision fatigue depletes your mental energy throughout the day. By 3 p.m., you're making choices with the cognitive equivalent of a dying phone battery. That's when tomorrow starts winning every negotiation with your better judgment. But here's what really kills momentum: the absence of immediate consequences. When you delay working on your flagship project, nothing terrible happens right now. The pain is distant and abstract. Your brain, wired for immediate survival, chooses the path of least resistance, which is usually checking email, attending another pointless meeting, or reorganizing your desk for the 3rd time this week. Meanwhile, notifications hijack your dopamine system. Every ping promises a tiny hit of novelty. Shallow work crowds out deep work because shallow work feels productive while requiring zero mental heavy lifting. Your cluttered workspace mirrors your cluttered mind, creating friction at the exact moment you need momentum most. The result? You become a professional procrastinator with a beautiful vision and an empty pipeline. The missing floor, why you need an anti-vision. Winners don't just know where they're going, they know exactly where they refuse to go. Jeff Bezos didn't just envision Amazon's success. He used what he called the regret minimization framework, imagining himself at 80, looking back with crushing regret at the opportunities he didn't pursue. That anti-vision of lifelong regret drove him to leave his comfortable Wall Street job and build what became the world's largest online retailer. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's longtime partner, built his fortune not by chasing hot stocks, but by religiously avoiding stupidity. His anti-vision was simple: don't lose money. This floor became the foundation for decades of compounding wealth. Your anti-vision is the vivid, specific future you refuse to tolerate. It's not vague anxiety about not succeeding. It's the crystal clear picture of where you'll be in 5 years if you keep operating the way you're operating now. Here's why this works. Prospect theory shows that losses loom roughly twice as large as equivalent gains in our psychological experience. A $1,000 loss feels worse than a $1,000 gain feels good. Your brain is wired to avoid pain faster than it chases pleasure. When you make your anti-vision vivid and immediate, you tap into this asymmetry. But here's the key: you need both engines running. Pull vision gives you direction. Push anti-vision gives you urgency. Together, they create what I call the anti-vision switch, a system that turns motivation from a feeling into a machine. The compound cost of drift? Let me paint you a picture of what happens when you don't flip this switch. 5 years pass. You're still in the same revenue band, fighting the same fires, making the same excuses. Your competitors, the ones who seemed less talented, less connected, less deserving, have built systems that compound their efforts. They're not smarter than you. They're not luckier than you. They just stopped negotiating with themselves every morning about whether today was the day to execute. Your identity starts to drift. You begin rationalizing underperformance. I'm more of a big picture person. I work better under pressure. I'm waiting for the right opportunity. These stories feel comforting, but they're poison. Standards erode gradually, then suddenly. You start tolerating what you once rejected. Your team and clients mirror your inconsistency. They stop expecting excellence because you've stopped delivering it. Trust erodes. Options shrink. The gap between who you are and who you could have been becomes a chasm you can't bridge with good intentions. The math is merciless. Small compromises compound into massive regrets. The anti-vision switch, your new operating system. Here's what you're going to build by the end of this book: a motivation machine that runs on 2 engines and operates through 7 integrated systems. First, you'll craft your push-pull pairing, one line you're moving toward and one line you refuse to tolerate. You'll read both morning, noon, and night, keeping a 70-30 pull-push ratio that energizes without overwhelming. Next, you'll build dual frames, a North Star that selects your yeses and a never list that automates your nos. These visible rules will convert your values into policies, making decisions faster and protecting your best hours. Then comes See Failure, a 30-minute premortem and backcast process that names the ways your plan could die and maps backward from success to today's first moves. You'll trade surprises for preparedness. You'll install anti-goals with if-then triggers that fire the moment your biggest derailers appear. No more negotiating with yourself when willpower is low. Your responses become reflexes. Friction design reshapes your environment so good behaviors become easier and bad behaviors become harder. You'll stop fighting urges and start rerouting them. Your system of defaults will eliminate decision fatigue by codifying standard responses for time, work, and communication. Fewer decisions, better decisions. Finally, your minimum viable day creates an unbreakable floor. 3 tiny non-negotiables you can hit even at 20% energy. This prevents 0 days and builds the identity of someone who always does what matters most. Why this sequence matters. You start with meaning, push-pull, before boundaries, dual frames, because direction without urgency creates drift, while urgency without direction creates chaos. The sequence prevents both. You pressure test with premortems before encoding with anti-goals, because you need to know where you're vulnerable before you can defend those points. You design your environment and defaults after you know your patterns, because systems should serve strategy, not the other way around. You lock it all in with the minimum day, because consistency compounds faster than intensity. Small, steady beats, big, sporadic every time. The winner's mindset versus the loser's trap. Winners invert and install floors. They don't trust mood, they trust systems. They enforce standards with kindness and spine. They measure, then improve. They know that discipline is just remembering what you want most when you want it least. Losers chase hype and hope. They wait for inspiration like it's a bus that might show up. They outsource their standards to other people's urgency. They confuse activity with progress, motion with momentum. The difference isn't talent. It's not luck. It's not connections. It's the willingness to build a machine that works when you don't feel like working. Your proof of concept. SpaceX doesn't just dream of Mars. They assume every rocket will fail and design tests to reveal exactly how. They backcast from mission goals to today's experiments. Their default is to iterate fast and learn faster. The result? They've revolutionized space travel while traditional aerospace companies are still filing paperwork. This is your proof of concept. When you combine vision with anti-vision, when you pressure test your plans and encode your responses, when you design friction and defaults that serve your priorities, you don't just achieve your goals. You become the kind of person who makes achievement inevitable. The switch is in your hands. The only question is whether you'll flip it today or spend another year wondering why motivation keeps failing you. In the next chapter, we'll install your core engine, the push-pull system that will power everything else. But first, you need to decide. Will you be the person who builds the machine or the person who keeps hoping the machine will build itself? The choice is yours. The time is now. But something tells me you already knew that. You just needed someone to show you how to flip the switch. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Grow to the Top and activate notifications to receive more self-improvement tips that will supercharge your growth. And make sure to give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. It really helps the channel grow. Thank you for your support. Chapter 2, Push-Pull. There's a secret that separates the builders from the dreamers, and it's hiding in plain sight. Watch any rocket launch. Two forces work in perfect harmony, the explosive thrust pushing away from Earth's gravity and the precise navigation system pulling toward a distant target. Remove either force, and you get spectacular failure. Keep both engines firing in calibrated harmony, and you get orbit. Your motivation works the same way. But here's what nobody tells you. You've been running on one engine your entire life. This chapter will teach you to install the second engine, the one that fires when inspiration fails, when the vision feels distant, when Monday morning hits like a cold slap and you'd rather stay in bed. By the end, you'll have a dual-engine system that creates reliable ignition day after day, regardless of how you feel. But first, let me show you why everything you've been taught about motivation is backwards. The fatal flaw in positive thinking. Sarah was a brilliant marketing director with a crystal-clear vision. She could see her agency's future in vivid detail: the corner office, the prestigious clients, the team of creatives who respected her leadership. She had vision boards, affirmations, and enough positive energy to power a small city. She also had a problem. Every few weeks, her motivation would crater. The vision that felt so real on Sunday night would feel like fantasy by Wednesday afternoon. She'd find herself scrolling LinkedIn, wondering if she was cut out for leadership, questioning whether her dreams were just delusions. Sarah's mistake wasn't lack of vision, it was relying on vision alone. Here's what the positive thinking industrial complex doesn't want you to know. Desire alone drifts. Without a counterbalancing force, even the most compelling vision becomes background noise. Your brain adapts to positive stimuli through a process called hedonic adaptation. The same vision that once electrified you becomes as motivating as elevator music. But there's a deeper problem. Pure positive thinking creates what psychologists call fantasy-based planning. When you only visualize success, you don't prepare for obstacles. When challenges inevitably arise, you're not just unprepared, you're shocked. The gap between expectation and reality becomes a motivation killer. The solution isn't more positive thinking, it's adding the missing engine. The engine you never knew you had. Elon Musk doesn't just dream of Mars colonies and sustainable transport. He's driven by something darker and more immediate, the terror of stagnation and existential risk. In interviews, he's spoken about his deep fear that humanity might remain forever trapped on one planet, vulnerable to extinction events. This isn't pessimism, it's fuel. Musk's pull is multiplanetary civilization. His push is the unacceptable alternative, a single-planet species facing inevitable doom. Together, these forces create what observers describe as relentless execution across impossible timelines. This is the push-pull principle in action. Your pull is where you're going, your North Star, your vision, your desired future. Your push is where you're coming from, the life you refuse to live, the future you won't tolerate, the line you will not cross. Most people have a pull. Winners have both. Here's why this works at the neurological level. Your nervous system has two primary motivational circuits. The approach system responds to rewards and opportunities. The avoidance system responds to threats and losses. When you activate both simultaneously, you don't just add their effects, you multiply them. Prospect theory, developed by Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman, explains the asymmetry. Losses feel roughly twice as powerful as equivalent gains. A potential $1,000 loss motivates more urgently than a potential $1,000 gain. Your anti-vision taps into this asymmetry, creating urgency that pure positive thinking can't match. But here's the crucial part. You need both engines calibrated correctly. Too much pull without push creates drift. Too much push without pull creates burnout. The magic happens in the balance. The mythology that's holding you back. Before we build your dual engine system, let's destroy 3 myths that might be sabotaging your progress. Myth 1. Only positive visualization works. This feel-good philosophy ignores how your brain actually operates. Without threat salience, urgency fades. The most successful people in history weren't relentless optimists. They were strategic pessimists who prepared for failure while working toward success. The truth is more nuanced. You need respectful fear, not panic. The goal isn't to terrorize yourself into action. It's to create enough discomfort with the status quo that staying put becomes more painful than moving forward. Myth 2. Fear is toxic. Eliminate it. This new age nonsense has created a generation of leaders who can't handle adversity. Fear isn't your enemy. Uncontrolled fear is your enemy. Contained fear is rocket fuel. It sharpens focus, accelerates decision-making, and cuts through the comfortable delusions that keep you stuck. Think of fear like fire. Uncontained, it burns down the house. Contained in an engine, it powers the machine. The difference isn't the presence of fear, it's the container you build around it. Myth 3. Just hustle harder. This is the battle cry of people who mistake motion for momentum. Directionless grind wastes seasons. You can work 18-hour days and still end up exactly where you started if you're not moving towards something specific while moving away from something unacceptable. Hustle without direction is just expensive procrastination. Installing your dual engine system. Now comes the practical part. You're going to create 2 one-line statements that will become the operating system for your motivation. These aren't affirmations or wishful thinking. They're precision instruments designed to activate both motivational circuits in your nervous system. Your North Star follows this template. By specific date, I will specific measurable outcome. Notice the precision. Vague goals create vague results. Your brain needs a clear target to lock onto. Your anti-vision follows this template. I refuse to live a life where vivid description of your lowest acceptable state. This isn't about imagining worst-case scenarios. It's about defining your floor, the line below which you will not go. Here's the key. Both statements must be visceral, not intellectual. They should create a physical response when you read them. If your North Star doesn't make you lean forward slightly, it's too weak. If your anti-vision doesn't create a subtle tension in your chest, it's too abstract. You'll read both statements 3 times daily, morning, midday, and evening. This isn't ritual for ritual's sake. It's neurological programming. Repetition strengthens neural pathways. The more you activate both circuits, the more automatic the response becomes. Place both statements where you make decisions: your lock screen, your desk, your bathroom mirror. The goal is to make them impossible to ignore when your willpower is negotiating with your comfort zone. The calibration secret. Here's where most people get it wrong. They assume more intensity equals better results. That's like assuming more fuel makes a rocket faster. Too much fuel and you explode on the launch pad. Start with a 70-30 ratio. 70% pull, 30% push. Your North Star should feel inspiring and energizing. Your anti-vision should feel uncomfortable but not overwhelming. You want enough discomfort to create urgency without creating paralysis. Pay attention to your energy levels over the first 2 weeks. If you feel sluggish or uninspired, your push might be too weak. Strengthen your anti-vision slightly. Make it more vivid, more immediate, more personal. If you feel anxious or overwhelmed, your push might be too strong. Soften the language or extend the timeline. This is precision work, not guesswork. Your motivation system should feel like a well-tuned engine, powerful, reliable, and sustainable over long periods. The emotional rehearsal technique. Once a week, you'll run what I call an emotional rehearsal. Close your eyes for 60 seconds and feel both futures. First, experience your North Star as if it's already happened. Feel the satisfaction, the pride, the sense of accomplishment. Let it fill your chest and straighten your spine. Then, without transition, experience your anti-vision as if it's your current reality. Feel the disappointment, the regret, the weight of unfulfilled potential. Let it create tension in your body. Now, open your eyes and write one sentence about each feeling. These sentences become the emotional anchors for your statements. When the words start feeling stale, return to the feelings. Emotion drives action. Logic just provides the route. Anchoring the system. Your new dual-engine system needs triggers, specific moments when you'll engage both circuits. The most effective anchor is your daily startup routine. Read both statements immediately after you open your laptop and immediately before you close it. This creates a motivational bookend around your productive hours. Keep a small tally mark each time you complete the reading. This isn't about tracking for tracking's sake. It's micro-proof that you showed up. Over time, these tiny marks become evidence of your commitment to yourself. They build what psychologists call self-efficacy, the belief that you can do what you say you'll do. When the system starts working, in the first week, you'll notice a small uptick in focus. Decisions will feel slightly clearer. The gap between intention and action will shrink marginally. By week 3, something more significant happens. You'll start checking decisions against both statements automatically. Does this move me toward my North Star or away from my anti-vision? Detours will drop noticeably because you'll catch them earlier. At the 6-week mark, if you've calibrated correctly, you'll experience what I call snap to action during slumps. When motivation dips, and it will, your system will fire automatically. You won't need to think your way into action, you'll feel your way into it. Weekly throughput typically increases by 25 to 40% at this stage. Troubleshooting your engine. 3 problems can derail your system, and each has a specific fix. If you feel overwhelmed by fear, your push is too strong. Shorten your timeline to 12 weeks instead of 12 months. Soften your anti-vision language. Remember, you want discomfort, not terror. If your North Star feels abstract or uninspiring, add metrics and compress the timeline. I will build a successful business becomes, by December 31st, I will generate $50,000 in monthly recurring revenue. Specificity creates salience. If both statements start feeling stale, you're experiencing desensitization. Rotate your phrasing every 30 days. Add a 60-second emotional rehearsal to reactivate the feelings behind the words. Your brain adapts to repetition, so you must adapt your approach. The compound effect. Here's what happens when you run this system consistently for 6 months. Your identity starts to shift. You become someone who acts regardless of how you feel. Your reputation changes. People start seeing you as reliable, consistent, unstoppable. Opportunities begin flowing toward you because opportunity flows toward momentum. More importantly, you develop what I call motivational anti-fragility. Setbacks don't derail you, they activate your system. Bad days become data points, not disasters. You stop being a victim of your moods and start being the architect of your outcomes. Your dual-engine system becomes the foundation for everything else we'll build in this book. But before we can construct the frameworks that will protect your progress and accelerate your results, you need to understand something crucial about the hidden forces that are currently sabotaging your best intentions. In the next chapter, we'll explore the invisible boundaries that separate winners from everyone else, and why most people's values are actually just suggestions their calendar ignores. Chapter 3: Dual Frames. Your calendar is lying to you. Right now, it's filled with meetings you don't want to attend, commitments that drain your energy, and urgent requests that have nothing to do with your actual priorities. You tell yourself you value focus, but your schedule screams chaos. You claim to prioritize deep work, but your days are chopped into 15-minute fragments. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Your values don't live in your head. They live in your calendar. And if there's a gap between what you say matters and how you spend your time, you're not just being hypocritical. You're being systematically sabotaged by the absence of something most high performers take for granted. This chapter will show you how to build what I call dual frames, a ceiling and floor system that transforms vague values into visible rules. By the end, you'll have 2 artifacts that will change your week immediately: a North Star that selects your yeses, and a never list that automates your no's. But first, let me show you why good intentions without boundaries always lose to other people's urgencies. The energy leak that's killing your progress. Marcus was a talented software engineer with big dreams. He wanted to build his own SaaS product, escape the corporate grind, and create something meaningful. He had the skills, the vision, and the motivation. What he didn't have was boundaries. His days looked like this: arrive at the office with plans to work on his side project during lunch, get pulled into an urgent debugging session, agree to help a colleague with their presentation, say yes to a last-minute client call, accept an invitation to drinks after work because networking is important. By Friday, he'd made 0 progress on his product. By month's end, he was exactly where he started. By year's end, he was bitter, exhausted, and wondering why everyone else seemed to be moving faster than him. Marcus's problem wasn't lack of talent or motivation. It was the absence of what high performers call decision architecture, a system that makes good choices automatic and bad choices obvious. Without boundaries, you drift. Your time gets allocated by whoever asks loudest. Your energy flows toward whatever feels urgent, regardless of whether it's important. You become a passenger in your own life, wondering why you never arrive at your intended destination. But boundaries without direction create a different problem. You become efficient at the wrong things. You protect your time religiously, but spend it on activities that don't compound. You say no to everything, but yes to nothing meaningful. The solution isn't better time management. It's building what architects call a structural system, a framework that bears the load so individual decisions don't have to. The Steve Jobs Principle. In 1997, Steve Jobs returned to a dying Apple. The company was hemorrhaging money, losing market share, and drowning in a sea of mediocre products. Most CEOs would have tried to do more products, more features, more marketing. Jobs did the opposite. He killed over 70% of Apple's product line. He said no to thousands of good ideas to say yes to a few great ones. His famous quote captures the essence: "I'm actually as proud of the things we haven't done as the things we have done." Innovation is saying no to 1,000 things. This wasn't just philosophy. It was architecture. Jobs built what I call a never list into Apple's DNA. No products without clear differentiation. No features that didn't serve the core user experience. No partnerships that diluted the brand. No compromises on design quality. The result? Apple went from near bankruptcy to becoming the world's most valuable company. Not by doing more, but by doing less, with ruthless precision. Jobs understood something most people miss. Constraints don't limit creativity, they focus it. When you know exactly what you won't do, you can pour all your energy into what you will do. The never list doesn't restrict your options, it clarifies them. But here's the crucial part. Jobs paired his never list with an equally clear North Star. Every product had to advance Apple's mission of creating technology that was both powerful and beautifully simple. The ceiling, vision, and floor, boundaries, worked together to create what observers called magical focus. This is the dual frames principle in action, a clear ceiling that pulls you forward and a firm floor that prevents you from sinking. The mythology of unlimited options. Before we build your dual frame system, let's destroy 3 myths that might be sabotaging your progress. Myth 1. Boundaries are limiting. This is the battle cry of people who confuse motion with momentum. They believe that keeping all options open maximizes opportunity. In reality, it maximizes confusion. When everything is possible, nothing is probable. The truth is counterintuitive. Boundaries amplify freedom by protecting what matters most. When you know exactly what you won't do, you can fully commit to what you will do. Constraints don't limit your power, they concentrate it. Think of boundaries like the banks of a river. Remove them, and the water spreads into a useless swamp. Maintain them, and the same water becomes a powerful current that can carve through mountains. Myth 2. Saying no kills opportunity. This fear keeps talented people trapped in mediocrity. They say yes to everything because they're terrified of missing the big break. But here's what they don't realize. Random yeses kill real opportunities. Every yes to something unimportant is an automatic no to something that could be transformative. When you're spread across 10 mediocre projects, you can't excel at the one that could change your life. Opportunity doesn't come from saying yes more often. It comes from saying yes more strategically. Myth 3. Values live in your head. This is perhaps the most dangerous myth because it feels so reasonable. People spend hours crafting mission statements and values documents, then wonder why their behavior doesn't change. Here's the reality. Values without visible expression are just wishful thinking. Your real values aren't what you write in your journal. They're what you do when no one is watching. They're encoded in your calendar, your bank account, and your energy allocation. If you want to change your values, you have to change your systems. Building your North Star. Your North Star is your ceiling, the specific outcome that pulls you forward and gives meaning to your daily choices. But here's where most people get it wrong. They make their North Star too vague, too distant, or too abstract. I want to be successful isn't a North Star, it's a wish. I want to help people isn't a North Star, it's a sentiment. Your North Star must be specific enough to guide decisions and concrete enough to measure progress. The template is simple. By specific date, I will specific measurable outcome. The date creates urgency, the specificity creates clarity, the measurability creates accountability. But here's the crucial part. Your North Star must be visible where you make decisions. Post it on your calendar header. Put it on your computer desktop. Write it on an index card and place it where you'll see it during your most important work sessions. Visibility creates salience. When your North Star is hidden in a notebook or buried in a document, it becomes background noise. When it's impossible to ignore, it becomes a decision filter. Every opportunity gets evaluated against the same question: does this move me toward my North Star or away from it? Constructing your never list. Your never list is your floor, the specific behaviors, commitments, and compromises you refuse to tolerate. This isn't about being negative or pessimistic. It's about creating guardrails that protect your most valuable resource: focused attention. Your never list should cover 5 critical zones where energy leaks typically occur. Time boundaries protect your peak performance hours. Money boundaries prevent financial decisions that compromise your long-term position. Commitment boundaries stop scope creep and mission drift. Technology boundaries defend against digital distraction. Ethics boundaries maintain your integrity under pressure. Each boundary should be specific enough to be enforceable. No interruptions during deep work is better than protect focus time. No meetings before 10 a.m. is better than guard morning energy. No unscoped projects is better than maintain clarity. But here's the secret that transforms your never list from a wish into a weapon. Every no must have a paired default yes. When you say no to meetings before 10 a.m., you're saying yes to deep work during peak cognitive hours. When you say no to unscoped projects, you're saying yes to clear deliverables and realistic timelines. This pairing prevents your never list from becoming a wall of negativity. Instead, it becomes a redirection system that channels energy toward your priorities while deflecting energy away from distractions. The enforcement challenge. Building your dual frames is the easy part. Enforcing them is where most people fail. The moment you start saying no to requests that violate your never list, you'll face pushback. People who are used to unlimited access to your time and attention won't appreciate the new boundaries. This is where most people cave. They apologize for their boundaries, make exceptions just this once, or abandon the system entirely when it creates temporary friction. This is exactly backwards. Your boundaries aren't suggestions, they're policies. When someone asks you to violate your never list, you don't negotiate. You explain the boundary, offer an alternative that works within your system, and hold firm. This isn't about being difficult, it's about being consistent. The magic happens when you enforce your boundaries with what I call kind spine. Firm on the principle, flexible on the method. You don't compromise your never list, but you do help people find solutions that work for everyone. Over time, something remarkable happens. People stop testing your boundaries because they know you'll enforce them. They start respecting your time because you've demonstrated that you respect it. Your reputation shifts from always available to highly effective. Making your system stick. Your dual frame system needs 3 elements to become permanent: naming, visibility, and measurement. Naming your rules increases what psychologists call cognitive stickiness. No meetings before 10 a.m. becomes the 10 to noon wall. No unscoped projects becomes scope or nope. Labels make abstract concepts concrete and memorable. Visibility ensures your system stays active. Create a simple one-page visual that shows both your North Star and your never list. Post it in your workspace where you'll see it during decision moments. The goal is to make your system impossible to ignore when willpower is low. Measurement creates feedback loops that strengthen the system over time. Track simple metrics that reflect your boundaries: deep work hours per week, response time to non-urgent requests, number of unscoped commitments accepted. When these metrics drift, you know your system needs adjustment. The compound effect of clear frames. Here's what happens when you run your dual frame system consistently. Decision time gets cut in half because most choices become automatic. Your calendar starts reflecting your priorities instead of other people's urgencies. Energy leaks get plugged, and that reclaimed energy flows toward your North Star. But the deeper transformation is psychological. You stop feeling like a victim of circumstances and start feeling like the architect of your outcomes. Stress drops because you're no longer constantly choosing between competing priorities. Your system has already chosen for you. Your reputation changes too. People start seeing you as someone who knows what they want and protects what matters. This attracts better opportunities because opportunity flows toward clarity and consistency. Most importantly, you develop what I call strategic confidence. The quiet certainty that comes from knowing your decisions are aligned with your deepest priorities. You stop second-guessing yourself because your system does the thinking for you. Your dual frames become the foundation for everything else we'll build. But before we can construct the advanced systems that will accelerate your progress, you need to understand something crucial about the hidden patterns that are currently sabotaging your best-laid plans. In the next chapter, we'll explore a counterintuitive truth that separates strategic thinkers from everyone else. The most successful people spend more time imagining failure than visualizing success. And there's a specific reason why this backwards approach creates breakthrough results. Chapter 4. See Failure. There's a room at Amazon headquarters where dreams go to die. It's called the PR FAQ room, and it's where every new product idea faces its execution. But here's what makes it different from every other corporate meeting room. They don't start by discussing how the product will succeed. They start by writing the press release for its failure. Amazon discontinues product name after disappointing market response, the headline might read. Then comes the brutal autopsy. The product failed because customers found it confusing, the pricing was wrong, and the team underestimated technical complexity. Only after they've thoroughly explored how the product could die do they work backward to figure out how to make it live. This backwards approach has helped Amazon avoid countless expensive mistakes and launch products that actually matter. This chapter will teach you the same counterintuitive skill that separates strategic thinkers from wishful thinkers, the ability to see failure before it happens. By the end, you'll have a 30-minute process that transforms "I hope this works" into "if this fails, here's exactly why, and here's how I'll stop it." But first, let me show you why your brain's natural optimism is sabotaging your success. The blind spot that's costing you months. Rachel was launching her consulting practice with the confidence of someone who'd spent 10 years mastering her craft. She had a clear vision, a solid business plan, and enough savings to last 6 months. She also had a problem she couldn't see coming. 3 months in, her pipeline was empty. The referral strategy she'd counted on wasn't working. The content marketing approach that seemed so logical was generating views but no leads. The pricing model that felt reasonable was scaring away prospects. Each setback felt like a surprise, even though they were predictable patterns that derail most new consultants. Rachel wasn't failing because she lacked skill or determination. She was failing because she'd never asked the most important question: what if this doesn't work? This is the planning fallacy in action. Our brains are wired for optimism, which serves us well in many contexts, but becomes dangerous when we're trying to execute complex projects. We systematically underestimate how long things will take, how much they'll cost, and how many things can go wrong. The result is what psychologists call the surprise gap, the painful distance between what we expected and what actually happened. Most people experience this gap as bad luck or unforeseen circumstances. Strategic thinkers recognize it as a failure of imagination. Here's the counterintuitive truth. You can't correct risks you refuse to name. Every month you spend dealing with unexpected problems is a month you could have spent preventing them. Every crisis that catches you off guard is a crisis you could have seen coming if you'd been willing to look. The Amazon advantage. Jeff Bezos built Amazon on a simple principle: work backwards from the customer experience you want to create. But there's a deeper layer to Amazon's success that most people miss. They don't just work backwards from success, they work backwards from failure. Every major product launch begins with what they call a premortem. The team assumes the product has failed spectacularly and works backward to identify the most likely causes. They ask questions like, what would make customers hate this? Where would we run out of money? What technical problems would kill us? This isn't pessimism, it's precision. By imagining failure in detail, they surface blind spots that would otherwise remain hidden until it's too late to fix them. They turn vague anxieties into specific action items. They convert "what if" into "when this happens, we'll do that." The same principle powers SpaceX's approach to rocket development. They don't just test their rockets, they test them to failure. Every component is pushed beyond its limits to reveal exactly where and how it breaks. This failure analysis as operating system approach has allowed them to iterate faster than companies that try to avoid failure altogether. The pattern is clear. The most successful organizations don't avoid thinking about failure. They make it a core competency. They understand that naming risks reduces their power, while ignoring risks amplifies it. The mythology of positive thinking. Before we build your failure detection system, let's destroy 3 myths that might be holding you back. Myth 1. Thinking about failure attracts it. This new age nonsense has infected business culture like a virus. The idea that negative thoughts somehow magnetize negative outcomes is not just wrong, it's dangerous. It prevents people from doing the hard work of risk assessment. The truth is exactly the opposite. Thinking about failure prevents it. When you imagine how your plan could fail, you're not attracting failure. You're preparing for it. You're building immune systems into your strategy. You're creating early warning systems that can save you months of wasted effort. Myth 2. Planning kills creativity. This is the battle cry of people who confuse chaos with innovation. They believe that too much structure will somehow stifle their creative genius. In reality, clarity unlocks better creative choices. When you know exactly what could go wrong, you can design around those constraints. When you understand your limitations, you can find creative ways to transcend them. The most innovative solutions often emerge from the most rigorous constraint analysis. Myth 3. We'll pivot later. This is perhaps the most expensive myth in business. The idea that you can course correct after you've already invested time and money sounds flexible, but it's actually wasteful. Late pivots are expensive pivots because you've already committed resources to the wrong direction. Early course corrections cost hours. Late course corrections cost months. The difference between catching a problem in week 1 versus month 6 can be the difference between success and bankruptcy. The 30-minute failure loop. Now comes the practical part. You're going to build a 30-minute process that transforms wishful thinking into strategic thinking. This isn't about becoming pessimistic, it's about becoming prepared. The process has 3 10-minute phases: failure headline, counters and tripwires, and backcast planning. Each phase builds on the previous one, creating a complete picture of both the risks you face and the actions you'll take to address them. Start with the failure headline. Set a timer for 10 minutes and write this sentence: project name failed, here's why. Then let your imagination run wild. What are all the ways this could go wrong? Don't censor yourself. Don't worry about being realistic. Just brain dump every possible failure mode onto paper. The goal isn't to be comprehensive, it's to surface the patterns your optimistic brain wants to ignore. You're looking for the failure modes that feel most visceral, most likely, or most devastating. Circle the 3 that make your stomach tighten when you read them. Now rank these 3 by impact and probability. Impact means how much would this hurt if it happened. Probability means how likely is this to actually occur. The risks that score high on both dimensions become your focus areas. Building your defense system. The second 10-minute phase is where strategy meets tactics. For each of your 3 primary risks, you're going to design a counter move and a tripwire. The counter move is what you'll do if the risk materializes. This isn't a vague intention like work harder or be more careful. It's a specific action you can take immediately when you detect the problem. If your risk is customers don't understand the value proposition, your counter might be conduct 5 customer interviews within 48 hours to identify the confusion points. The tripwire is your early warning system, a measurable indicator that tells you the risk is becoming reality. For the value proposition risk, your tripwire might be conversion rate drops below 2% for 3 consecutive days, or more than 30% of sales calls end without a follow-up meeting scheduled. The key is making both the counter and the tripwire specific enough to be actionable. Vague responses to vague risks create vague results. Specific responses to specific risks create specific improvements. Assign an owner to each counter and tripwire. If you're working solo, you're the owner of everything. If you're working with a team, Distribute ownership based on expertise and capacity. The goal is to ensure that someone is specifically responsible for monitoring each risk and executing each response. The backwards map. The final 10-minute phase flips your perspective from failure to success. You're going to start at your desired outcome and work backward to today, creating a clear path from vision to action. Begin by writing a detailed description of success. What does it look like when your project is complete? What specific outcomes have you achieved? What metrics have you hit? Make this as vivid and concrete as possible. Now ask, what was the last thing that happened before we achieved this outcome? Write that down. Then ask, what happened before that? Keep working backward, step by step, until you reach today. This backwards mapping reveals the critical path, the sequence of actions that must happen for success to occur. It also exposes dependencies and bottlenecks that forward planning often misses. When you work backward from a clear end state, the necessary steps become obvious. Select the first 3 actions from your backwards map and calendar them immediately. Not next week, not when you have time, today. The gap between planning and action is where most strategies die. The cost of inaction mathematics. Here's a technique that adds urgency to your failure analysis. Quantify the cost of delay. For every week you postpone addressing a known risk, what does it cost you in revenue, learning, or opportunity? If delaying your product launch by 1 month costs you $10,000 in potential revenue, suddenly that weekend spent on risk mitigation looks like a bargain. If waiting to hire that key team member costs you 2 weeks of project time, the urgency of recruitment becomes clear. Put these numbers in your calendar notes or project dashboard. Make the cost of inaction visible and immediate. Abstract risks feel manageable. Quantified risks demand action. Keeping it simple. The biggest trap in failure analysis is complexity. When you try to account for every possible risk, you end up paralyzed by the sheer volume of things that could go wrong. The solution is ruthless prioritization. 3 risks, 3 counters, 3 actions. This constraint forces you to focus on what matters most. It prevents analysis paralysis while ensuring you address the risks that could actually kill your project. You can always run another failure loop later if new risks emerge. Post your counters and tripwires where you do your work, your dashboard, your Kanban board, your calendar. The goal is to make risk monitoring automatic, not something you have to remember to do. When the system starts working, in the first week, you'll notice fewer surprises. Problems that would have blindsided you become manageable because you saw them coming. Your stress level drops because you're prepared instead of reactive. By week 3, you'll start catching problems earlier. Your tripwires will fire before small issues become big crises. You'll make course corrections that feel proactive rather than desperate. At the 6-week mark, your execution will feel calmer and more controlled. You'll ship projects more predictably because you've accounted for the things that usually derail them. Your reputation will start shifting from works hard to delivers consistently. The compound effect of strategic paranoia. Here's what happens when you make failure analysis a habit. You develop what I call strategic paranoia, the ability to see around corners without becoming paralyzed by what you see. You become the person who spots problems early, designs elegant solutions, and delivers results that feel effortless to outside observers. Your planning gets more realistic because you account for friction instead of ignoring it. Your timelines become more accurate because you build in buffers for the unexpected. Your confidence grows because you know you're prepared for whatever comes. Most importantly, you stop being surprised by setbacks. Instead of experiencing failure as a personal judgment, you experience it as data. Problems become puzzles to solve rather than evidence of your inadequacy. Your failure detection system becomes the foundation for the advanced techniques we'll explore next. But before we can build the automated responses that will make good choices effortless and bad choices obvious, you need to understand something crucial about the hidden patterns that govern human behavior. In the next chapter, we'll explore a counterintuitive truth about willpower. The strongest people don't rely on it at all. They've discovered something far more powerful that most people never learn to use. Chapter 5, Anti-Goals. Jerry Seinfeld has a secret weapon that most people would dismiss as childish. It's not his observational genius or his decades of stage experience. It's a simple calendar hanging on his wall with red X's marked through each day. Every day he writes a joke, he gets to mark an X. The goal isn't to write great jokes, it's to never break the chain. "Don't break the chain" became Seinfeld's mantra, and it transformed him from a struggling comedian into one of the most successful entertainers in history. But here's what most people miss about his system. It's not really about writing jokes. It's about engineering failure out of the equation. This chapter will teach you to build what I call anti-goals, explicit outcomes and behaviors you refuse to tolerate, backed by automatic responses that fire the moment danger appears. By the end, you'll have converted your biggest derailers into tripwires with pre-decided moves, so you stop negotiating with yourself when willpower is low. But first, let me show you why your current approach to self-control is doomed to fail. The willpower delusion. David was a brilliant software architect with a recurring problem. Every afternoon around 3 p.m., his focus would crater. He'd find himself checking social media, reading random articles, or reorganizing his desktop. Anything except the deep work that actually mattered. He tried everything the productivity gurus recommended. He used website blockers, but found ways around them. He practiced meditation, but still got distracted. He gave himself pep talks about staying focused, but the pattern continued. David's mistake wasn't lack of discipline or motivation. It was believing that willpower could solve a systems problem. He was trying to use a finite resource, self-control, to solve an infinite challenge, the constant temptation of distraction. Here's what research reveals about willpower. It's not a character trait, it's a cognitive resource. Like a muscle, it gets tired with use. Every decision you make, every temptation you resist, every choice you deliberate depletes your willpower reserves. By 3 p.m., David wasn't weak, he was running on empty. The solution isn't stronger willpower, it's eliminating the need for willpower altogether. Instead of relying on in-the-moment self-control, you pre-decide your responses to predictable situations. You turn choices into reflexes. You convert motivation from a mood into a machine. This is what separates high performers from everyone else. They don't have superhuman willpower. They've designed systems that make willpower irrelevant. The pattern recognition advantage. Here's a truth that will change how you think about failure. Most setbacks aren't random events. They're repeat offenders. The same 3 patterns usually cause 80% of your stalls, delays, and derailments. For David, the pattern was clear. Afternoon energy crash plus open browser equals lost productivity. For Sarah, the marketing director from Chapter 2, it was unclear project scope plus people-pleasing tendencies equals scope creep. For Marcus, the software engineer from Chapter 3, it was open calendar plus inability to say no equals fragmented focus. Once you see the patterns, you can interrupt them. But here's the crucial insight. You have to interrupt them before they start, not after they're already running. By the time you're scrolling social media, checking email, or saying yes to another random request, the pattern has already won. The key is building what psychologists call implementation intentions, if-then statements that link situational cues to specific behaviors. Instead of relying on willpower in the moment, you preload your responses during calm, rational planning time. This isn't just theory, it's one of the most robust findings in behavioral psychology. Studies show that people who use implementation intentions are 2 to 3 times more likely to follow through on their goals than people who rely on motivation alone. The Seinfeld system decoded. Let's decode what made Seinfeld's chain so powerful. On the surface, it looks like a simple habit tracker, but there are 3 deeper principles at work that most people miss. First, he defined success as consistency, not quality. The goal wasn't to write brilliant jokes, it was to write something, anything, every day. This removed the perfectionism that paralyzes most creative people. Bad jokes counted just as much as good ones, as long as they were written. Second, he made the anti-goal visible and immediate. The chain wasn't hidden in a journal or app, it was hanging on his wall where he couldn't ignore it. Breaking the chain meant facing a visual reminder of failure every time he walked past. Third, he designed for recovery, not perfection. If he missed a day, the system didn't collapse. He just started a new chain the next day. The motto, "Don't break the chain," was really "never miss twice." This prevented the all-or-nothing thinking that destroys most behavior change attempts. Seinfeld's system worked because it converted a vague intention, "I want to be a better comedian," into a specific anti-goal, "I refuse to have a day without writing," backed by an automatic response. "When I see a blank day, I write immediately." The mythology of motivation. Before we build your anti-goal system, let's destroy 3 myths that might be sabotaging your progress. Myth 1. I'll just use willpower. This is like saying you'll just hold your breath longer to improve your swimming. Willpower is a depleting resource, not an unlimited one. The more decisions you make, the worse your decision-making becomes. By evening, you're making choices with the cognitive equivalent of a dying phone battery. The truth is counterintuitive. The strongest people don't rely on willpower. They've designed systems that make willpower unnecessary. They pre-decide their responses during high-energy moments so they don't have to choose during low-energy moments. Myth 2. One slip means I'm done. This perfectionist thinking destroys more progress than any external obstacle. People abandon entire systems because of single failures, like throwing away a smartphone because the battery died once. The truth is more forgiving. Systems should be designed for recoverability, not perfection. The goal isn't to never fail, it's to fail fast, recover quickly, and never miss twice. Resilience beats perfection every time. Myth 3. More motivation will fix it. This is the battle cry of people who mistake inspiration for implementation. They think the solution to inconsistent behavior is better pep talks, more inspiring content, or stronger emotional connection to their goals. The truth is more practical. Pre-decisions beat pep talks. When you know exactly what you'll do in specific situations, motivation becomes irrelevant. You don't need to feel like doing the right thing. You just need to recognize the trigger and execute the script. Building your pattern interrupt system. Now comes the practical part. You're going to build a system that converts your biggest derailers into automatic recovery sequences. This isn't about eliminating all problems. It's about responding to problems so quickly that they can't compound. Start with pattern recognition. Review the last 30 days and identify your 5 biggest derailers. These are the situations, triggers, or circumstances that consistently knock you off track. Be specific about when and where they happen. "I get distracted" is too vague. "I check social media when I open my laptop after lunch" is actionable. Rank these derailers by frequency times impact. The ones that happen often and cost you significant time or energy become your focus areas. Circle the top 3. These are the patterns you'll interrupt first. For each pattern, write a 1-line description of the trigger. This becomes the if part of your implementation intention. The trigger should be specific enough that you can recognize it immediately when it happens. Scripting your reflexes. Now comes the crucial part, scripting your automatic responses. For each trigger, you'll create an if-then statement that removes choice from the equation. The template is simple. If specific trigger, then I specific action for specific duration. The specificity is crucial. Vague responses create vague results. Here's how this works in practice. If your trigger is, "I open social media during work hours," your script might be, "If I open social media during work hours, then I immediately start a 5-minute timer and finish my current microtask until it rings." This gives you a specific action that redirects your attention without requiring heroic willpower. If your trigger is, "I'm invited to a meeting without an agenda," your script might be, "If I'm invited to a meeting without an agenda, then I reply asking for the agenda and objectives within 2 hours, or I decline." This protects your time without requiring you to negotiate in the moment. If your trigger is, I start a project without clear scope, your script might be, if I start a project without clear scope, then I send a one-page scope clarification request before doing any work. This prevents scope creep before it starts. The key is making your responses binary. No nuance, no exceptions, no negotiations. Nuance belongs in design time, not execution time. When the trigger fires, you execute the script automatically. Planting your tripwires. Your scripts are only as good as your ability to remember them when it matters. This is where most people fail. They create perfect plans that they forget to use when stress is high and willpower is low. The solution is environmental design. Place your scripts exactly where the triggers happen. If you get distracted when you open your laptop, put the script on your laptop screen. If you say yes to bad meetings when checking email, put the script in your email signature. If you start projects without scope when using your project management tool, put the script in your dashboard. Add physical cues to interrupt autopilot behavior. A small sticky dot on your monitor can remind you to check your script before opening social media. A rubber band on your wrist can remind you to pause before saying yes to requests. A card in your notebook can remind you to clarify scope before starting work. The goal is to make your scripts impossible to ignore when the triggers fire. You're not relying on memory, you're relying on environmental design. The recovery protocol. Here's the secret that makes anti-goals sustainable. Design for recovery, not perfection. When you inevitably slip up, and you will, your response determines whether the slip becomes a slide or a quick course correction. Time box your recovery actions. Instead of grand gestures that require massive willpower, use short bursts that feel manageable. 5 minutes of focused work beats 30 minutes of guilty procrastination. 10 minutes of scope clarification beats weeks of confused effort. Use pre-commit language when writing your scripts. Instead of I will do X, write when Y happened, I did X. This subtle shift programs your brain to see the response as inevitable rather than optional. Schedule a weekly 10-minute derailer audit. Review which triggers fired, which scripts you executed, and which patterns are emerging. This isn't about judgment, it's about data collection. You're looking for trends that help you refine your system. When the system starts working, in the first 2 weeks, you'll notice your derailers dropping by about 20%. This isn't dramatic, but it's measurable. More importantly, you'll start catching yourself earlier in the pattern. Instead of losing an hour to distraction, you'll lose 5 minutes. By week 4, something more significant happens. Your responses become automatic. You'll find yourself executing your scripts without conscious thought. The gap between trigger and response shrinks from minutes to seconds. At the 8-week mark, if you've been consistent, you'll experience what I call derailer immunity. The situations that used to knock you off track for hours now barely register as blips. Your weekly output increases by 25 to 35% because you're bleeding less time to predictable problems. Most importantly, your confidence compounds. You stop seeing yourself as someone who struggles with self-control and start seeing yourself as someone who has systems that work. This identity shift creates an upward spiral. Better systems lead to better results, which lead to stronger identity, which lead to even better systems. Troubleshooting your anti-goals. 3 problems can derail your anti-goal system, and each has a specific fix. If you create too many rules, you'll overwhelm your cognitive capacity. Start with 3 anti-goals and add 1 per month after you see results. Your brain can only automate a limited number of responses at once. If your triggers are too vague, your scripts won't fire consistently. Anchor each trigger to specific time, place, or action cues. When I'm stressed is too abstract. When I sit down at my desk after lunch is concrete. If your scripts aren't visible where you need them, you'll forget to use them when willpower is low. Move your cues to the exact failure points. Increase font size and contrast. Add tactile elements that interrupt autopilot behavior. Your anti-goal system becomes the foundation for the advanced environmental design we'll explore next. But before we can reshape your physical and digital spaces to support your priorities, you need to understand something crucial about the hidden forces that are currently working against you. In the next chapter, we'll explore a counterintuitive truth about human behavior. The path of least resistance always wins, but most people never learn how to engineer what least resistance actually means. Chapter 6: Friction Design. There's a reason water always finds the easiest path down a mountain. It's not because water is lazy or lacks ambition. It's because physics doesn't negotiate. Water follows the path of least resistance with perfect consistency, carving canyons and shaping landscapes over time. What looks like a simple trickle becomes the Grand Canyon when you add enough time and persistence. Your behavior follows the same physics. You don't choose the hard path when an easy one is available. You don't fight friction when you can flow around it. You don't use willpower when your environment has already made the choice for you. This chapter will teach you to become the architect of your own behavioral physics. You'll learn to add micro-costs to temptations and remove micro-costs from priorities, so the default path becomes productive. Instead of fighting your urges, you'll reroute them. Instead of relying on discipline, you'll rely on design. But first, let me show you why your current environment is sabotaging your best intentions. The invisible force that's running your life. Lisa was a marketing consultant who couldn't understand why her days felt so chaotic. She'd start each morning with clear intentions, work on her flagship client project, update her website, and respond to important emails. By evening, she'd somehow spent 3 hours on social media, answered dozens of low-priority messages, and made zero progress on anything that mattered. She blamed herself for lacking discipline. She tried meditation apps, productivity courses, and motivational podcasts. Nothing worked. The same pattern repeated day after day. Good intentions in the morning, scattered execution by afternoon, guilt and frustration by evening. Lisa's problem wasn't lack of willpower or motivation. It was friction asymmetry. Her environment made bad behaviors effortless and good behaviors exhausting. Social media was one tap away on her phone's home screen. Email notifications interrupted her every few minutes. Her workspace was cluttered with visual distractions that pulled her attention in 12 directions. Meanwhile, her important work required multiple steps to access. She had to open her laptop, navigate to the right folder, find the right document, and remember where she'd left off. By the time she'd assembled everything she needed, her brain had already been hijacked by something easier. This is the hidden truth about human behavior. Your environment is scheduling your actions, whether you realize it or not. If the bad path is smoother than the good path, you'll slide down it every time. Not because you're weak, but because you're human. The Bill Gates revelation. Twice a year, Bill Gates disappears from the world. He retreats to a remote cabin with no internet, no phone, and no distractions. He calls these think weeks, and they've been responsible for some of Microsoft's most important strategic decisions, including the shift to internet-based services that kept the company competitive in the digital age. But here's what most people miss about Gates's think weeks. They're not just about having time to think. They're about engineering an environment where deep thinking is the only option. Gates doesn't rely on willpower to avoid distractions. He removes the possibility of distraction entirely. The cabin has no television, no social media access, and no way to check email. The only entertainment is books and his own thoughts. The only work materials are the strategic documents he's brought to review. The environment makes deep thinking the path of least resistance. This is friction design in its purest form, creating hard barriers to unwanted behaviors and soft runways to desired ones. Gates doesn't fight the urge to check email. He makes checking email impossible. He doesn't resist the temptation to multitask. He designs an environment where focused work is the only option. The results speak for themselves. Many of Microsoft's most profitable pivots emerged from these deliberately designed thinking environments. Gates understood something most people never learn. Environment beats intention every time. The Marie Kondo principle. Marie Kondo revolutionized home organization with a simple insight. Clutter isn't just messy, it's cognitively expensive. Every object in your visual field requires a tiny amount of mental processing power. Multiply that by hundreds of objects, and you're running your brain at half capacity before you even start working. Kondo's life-changing magic isn't really about tidiness, it's about cognitive relief. When you remove visual noise, you free up mental bandwidth for what matters. When you simplify your environment, you simplify your choices. When you design for clarity, you create space for focus. This principle extends far beyond physical spaces. Your digital environment is just as cluttered as your physical one, maybe more so. Your desktop is covered with random files. Your browser has 17 tabs open. Your phone has 43 apps on the home screen, each one competing for your attention. Every icon, notification, and visual element is making a tiny demand on your cognitive resources. By the time you sit down to do important work, you're already mentally exhausted from processing environmental noise. The solution isn't better self-control, it's better environmental design. Remove the noise and focus becomes effortless. Simplify the space and clarity emerges naturally. The mythology of superhuman discipline. Before we redesign your environment, let's destroy 3 myths that might be holding you back. Myth 1. Strong people don't need systems. This is the fantasy of people who've never built anything significant. They imagine that successful people wake up each day and muscle through challenges with pure willpower and determination. The truth is exactly the opposite. Strong people build systems so they can stay strong. They don't waste willpower on decisions that can be automated. They don't fight battles that can be avoided through better design. They understand that discipline is a finite resource that should be conserved for moments when it's truly needed. The strongest people you know aren't constantly exercising self-control. They've designed environments where self-control is rarely required. Myth 2. Turning off alerts will make me miss everything. This is the fear of people who confuse responsiveness with reactiveness. They believe that instant availability equals better service, that immediate responses equal better relationships. The truth is more nuanced. Batching increases both responsiveness and quality. When you check messages at designated times instead of constantly, you can give each one proper attention. When you're not constantly interrupted, you can think more clearly about your responses. When you control your availability, you can be more present when you choose to engage. The most responsive people aren't the most available. They're the most intentional about when and how they engage. Myth 3. Layout doesn't matter. This is the delusion of people who think they're above environmental influence. They believe that smart people should be able to focus regardless of their surroundings, that willpower should overcome any obstacle. The truth is humbling. Reachability and visibility define usage patterns more than conscious intention. If social media is easier to access than your important work, you'll check social media more often. If distractions are more visible than priorities, you'll be more distracted. If the wrong tools are within arm's reach, you'll use the wrong tools. Layout isn't just aesthetics, it's behavioral programming. Engineering your behavioral physics. Now comes the practical part. You're going to redesign your environment so good behaviors become effortless and bad behaviors become effortful. This isn't about eliminating temptation, it's about changing the relative cost of different choices. Start with your digital environment, since that's where most knowledge workers spend their days. Move social media and news apps off your phone's first screen. Add an extra authentication step, biometric unlock, or a passcode before you can access them. This creates what psychologists call activation energy, a small barrier that gives your conscious mind time to intervene before your impulses take over. Set up 2 specific windows for checking messages, once mid-morning and once mid-afternoon. Outside these windows, disable all push notifications. This isn't about being unresponsive, it's about being intentionally responsive instead of reactively responsive. For entertainment websites that tend to pull you into rabbit holes, create what I call a 2-step open. Set up a redirect page that you have to click through before accessing the site. This tiny friction point is often enough to break the automatic behavior and give you a moment to choose consciously. Now flip the equation for your priorities. Create one-click templates for your 3 most important types of work. If you write reports regularly, build a template with your standard structure already in place. If you create presentations frequently, set up a master template with your preferred layout and fonts. If you manage projects, create a standard project setup that you can duplicate instantly. Pin your most important documents where you can access them immediately. Pre-open tomorrow's work before you shut down today so you can start immediately without the friction of finding and opening files. Keep a dedicated workspace, physical or digital, that contains only the tools you need for deep work. The 2-minute reset ritual. Here's a technique that compounds the power of environmental design, the daily reset ritual. Spend 2 minutes at the end of each workday restoring your environment to factory settings. Clear your desk surface, close unnecessary browser tabs, open tomorrow's first task, set your phone to Do Not Disturb mode. This micro-ritual serves 2 purposes. First, it eliminates the activation energy required to start the next day. When you sit down to work, everything is already staged and ready. Second, it creates a psychological transition between today's work and tomorrow's possibilities. You're not just cleaning up, you're setting up for success. Use a simple checklist to make this automatic. Clear physical surfaces, close digital loops, stage tomorrow's first task, activate focus mode. The entire process should take less time than checking social media, but the impact on your next day's productivity is enormous. Advanced friction techniques. Once you've mastered basic friction design, you can implement more sophisticated techniques. Create single-purpose profiles for different types of work. Use one browser or desktop setup for deep work with only essential tools visible. Use a different setup for administrative tasks with communication tools and reference materials easily accessible. This context switching prevents the cognitive bleed that happens when work tools and distraction tools share the same space. When you're in deep work mode, distractions aren't just harder to access. They're literally not present in your environment. Implement the hard start, soft finish principle. Make it slightly difficult to begin low-value activities, but easy to stop them once you've started. Make it easy to begin high-value activities, but create natural momentum that encourages you to continue once you've started. Use visual anchors to maintain focus. Place a single index card with today's most important task in your direct line of sight. This serves as a constant reminder of your priority and a gentle redirect when your attention starts to wander. When environmental design starts working. In the first week, you'll notice that distractions feel slightly more effortful and priorities feel slightly more accessible. This isn't dramatic, but it's measurable. You'll catch yourself reaching for your phone and remembering that you've made it harder to access time-wasting apps. By week 3, you'll start experiencing what I call productive defaults. Instead of automatically checking social media when you're bored, you'll automatically open your important work because that's what's most accessible. Instead of getting pulled into email rabbit holes, you'll batch your responses during designated windows. At the 6-week mark, your environment will start feeling like a productivity partner rather than a distraction generator. You'll spend less mental energy fighting temptations and more mental energy on creative and strategic work. Context switches will drop by 40% or more, and your stress levels will decrease accordingly. Most importantly, you'll develop what I call environmental confidence, the quiet certainty that comes from knowing your space is designed to support your priorities. You'll stop feeling like you're fighting against your environment and start feeling like it's working with you. Troubleshooting your design. 3 problems can undermine your friction design efforts, and each has a specific solution. If you find yourself reverting to old habits despite environmental changes, you're probably experiencing friction leak, small workarounds that gradually erode your system. Schedule a weekly 5-minute environment audit. Look for new sources of distraction, shortcuts you've created around your barriers, or tools that have migrated back to easy access. Delete one friction leak each Friday. If you over-engineer your environment with too many changes at once, you'll create confusion instead of clarity. Change one variable per week and measure its effect before adding more complexity. Your environment should feel simpler, not more complicated. If colleagues or clients resist your new boundaries around availability and response times, communicate your batch windows and priority blocks clearly. Offer specific emergency channels with clear criteria for what constitutes an emergency. Most resistance comes from uncertainty, not malice. Your friction-designed environment becomes the foundation for the systematic approaches we'll explore next. But before we can build the automated decision-making systems that will eliminate choice fatigue entirely, you need to understand something crucial about the hidden patterns that govern high performance. In the next chapter, we'll explore a counterintuitive truth about decision-making. The most decisive people aren't constantly choosing. They've discovered a way to choose once and execute forever. Chapter 7, Defaults. Warren Buffett's calendar looks nothing like what you'd expect from one of the world's most successful investors. There are no back-to-back meetings, no packed schedules, no frantic rushing between appointments. Instead, there are large blocks of empty space labeled simply reading and thinking. These aren't suggestions or aspirations. They're non-negotiable defaults that have been protecting his most valuable hours for over 5 decades. When someone asks for a meeting during his reading time, Buffett doesn't deliberate. He doesn't weigh the pros and cons. He doesn't feel guilty about saying no. The decision was made years ago when he established his defaults. The calendar enforces what his values demand. This chapter will teach you to build what I call systems of defaults. Standard responses, scheduling blocks, and decision frameworks that eliminate the need to choose the same things repeatedly. By the end, you'll have 9 personal defaults that protect your best hours, align your collaborators, and turn predictability into your competitive advantage. But first, let me show you why your current approach to decision-making is slowly draining your effectiveness. The hidden tax on your mental energy. Michael was a talented product manager who prided himself on being flexible and responsive. His calendar was a testament to his availability. Meetings scattered throughout the day, no protected time for deep work, and an open-door policy that meant anyone could interrupt him at any time. He told himself this approach made him a better leader. He was accessible to his team, responsive to stakeholders, and adaptable to changing priorities. But by 3 p.m. each day, he felt mentally exhausted. By Friday, he was running on fumes. By month's end, he realized he'd spent weeks reacting to other people's agendas without making progress on his own priorities. Michael's problem wasn't lack of skill or dedication. It was decision fatigue masquerading as flexibility. Every time someone asked for his time, he had to decide whether to say yes or no. Every meeting request required him to weigh competing priorities. Every interruption forced him to choose between being helpful and being productive. These micro-decisions seem trivial in isolation, but they compound into cognitive exhaustion. Research from Columbia University shows that people make over 35,000 decisions per day. Each choice, no matter how small, depletes your mental energy. By afternoon, you're making important decisions with the cognitive equivalent of a dying phone battery. The solution isn't better decision-making, it's fewer decisions. When you convert recurring choices into automatic policies, you free up mental bandwidth for the decisions that actually matter. The Buffett Blueprint. Warren Buffett understands something most people never learn. Time is the ultimate non-renewable resource, and protecting it requires systems, not willpower. His approach to calendar management isn't about being antisocial or inflexible. It's about being intentional. Buffett's reading time isn't just blocked on his calendar. It's defended like a fortress. When investment bankers call with urgent opportunities, they're told to send materials that he'll review during his designated reading hours. When journalists request interviews, they're scheduled during his communication windows. When board meetings are proposed, they're batched into specific periods that don't fragment his thinking time. This isn't rigidity, it's strategic flexibility. By defaulting to protection of his core activities, Buffett can be selectively available when it truly matters. He doesn't say no to everything. He says no to everything that doesn't align with his predetermined priorities. The result is what he calls compound learning, the ability to accumulate insights over decades because he's never too busy to think. While other investors chase the latest trends, Buffett reads annual reports. While others attend endless meetings, Buffett contemplates long-term patterns. His defaults create the space where his competitive advantage lives. The Alabama Dynasty. Nick Saban built the most successful college football program in modern history using a principle he calls the process. But the process isn't really about football. It's about defaults that eliminate decision fatigue under pressure. Every practice follows the same structure. Every play is executed with the same attention to detail. Every player knows exactly what's expected in every situation. When the game is on the line and emotions are high, Alabama doesn't have to think. They execute their defaults. Saban's genius isn't in creating complex strategies. It's in making excellence automatic. His players don't decide whether to give maximum effort. Maximum effort is the default. His coaches don't debate whether to prepare thoroughly. Thorough preparation is the default. His program doesn't choose between short-term wins and long-term development. Long-term development is the default. This systematic approach to defaults has produced 6 national championships and a culture where success feels inevitable rather than accidental. The scoreboard reflects the defaults, not the other way around. The mythology of infinite flexibility. Before we build your default systems, let's destroy 3 myths that might be sabotaging your effectiveness. Myth 1. Defaults kill creativity. This is the fear of people who confuse structure with constraint. They believe that predetermined responses will somehow stifle their innovative thinking or prevent them from adapting to new situations. The truth is counterintuitive. Defaults protect the space where creativity happens. When you're not constantly deciding when to work, where to focus, and how to respond to routine requests, you can pour your creative energy into the work that actually matters. Structure doesn't kill creativity, it liberates it. The most creative people you know aren't constantly improvising their schedules. They've created reliable frameworks that protect their creative time and energy. Myth 2. I'll be less flexible. This is the anxiety of people who mistake reactiveness for responsiveness. They believe that having predetermined policies will make them rigid or unresponsive to changing circumstances. The truth is more nuanced. You'll be selectively flexible by design, not accidentally flexible by default. When you have clear policies for routine decisions, you can be genuinely flexible when exceptional circumstances arise. You'll respond to what matters instead of reacting to everything. Myth 3. I can just remember. This is the delusion of people who overestimate their cognitive capacity. They believe they can keep track of their priorities, commitments, and standards without external systems. The truth is humbling. Memory is a terrible project manager. Under stress, you'll forget your priorities. Under pressure, you'll compromise your standards. Under fatigue, you'll make decisions you'll regret later. Defaults don't just help you remember, they help you execute when remembering isn't enough. Building your time architecture. Now comes the practical part. You're going to create 9 defaults across 3 critical domains: time, work, and communication. These aren't rigid rules, they're intelligent policies that handle routine decisions automatically. Start with time defaults, since time is your most valuable and most vulnerable resource. Block 2 hours daily for deep work, the kind of focused, uninterrupted thinking that creates your most valuable output. These blocks are non-negotiable. No meetings, no calls, no exceptions except genuine emergencies. Establish meeting windows that batch your collaborative time into specific periods. For example, Tuesday through Thursday from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. This prevents meetings from fragmenting your entire week and creates predictable availability for your colleagues. Create recovery windows, protected buffers before and after major deliverables, presentations, or high-stakes meetings. These aren't luxury time. They're preparation and decompression time that ensure you show up at your best and process what you've learned. Systematizing your work standards. Your work defaults eliminate the cognitive overhead of constantly deciding how to approach projects and priorities. Implement a no-scope, no-start policy. You don't begin any project until the deliverables, timeline, and success criteria are clearly defined. This prevents scope creep and ensures you're solving the right problem. Use a visual work management system with work-in-progress limits. You can only have 3 active projects at any time. When someone asks you to take on something new, you show them your current commitments and ask which one they'd like you to deprioritize. This makes trade-offs visible and prevents overcommitment. Establish a clear definition of done for each type of work you do. What does a completed report look like? What criteria must be met before a project is considered finished? When everyone knows the standard, quality becomes automatic and revisions become rare. Streamlining your communication protocols. Communication defaults eliminate the constant negotiation about when, how, and where you'll interact with others. Promise a 24-hour response time for client communications and 72 hours for non-urgent inquiries. This sets clear expectations while giving you control over your communications schedule. Designate one primary channel for each type of communication. Email for formal requests, Slack for quick questions, phone for urgent issues. When people know which channel to use, you can batch similar communications and respond more efficiently. Require meeting agendas 24 hours in advance. If someone can't articulate the purpose and desired outcomes of a meeting beforehand, the meeting probably isn't necessary. This simple default eliminates most unproductive meetings before they happen. The power of naming and publishing. Here's a technique that makes your defaults stick. Give them memorable names. No meetings before 10 a.m. becomes the 10 to noon wall. No unscoped projects becomes scope or nope. Designated email times becomes inbox o'clock. Names make abstract policies concrete and memorable. They also make your defaults easier to communicate to others. When someone asks for a meeting during your protected time, you can simply say, "That's during my 10 to noon wall, but I have availability Tuesday afternoon." Create a one-page Working With Me document that outlines your key defaults. Share it with your team, clients, and frequent collaborators. This isn't about being difficult, it's about being clear. When people understand your operating system, they can work with it instead of against it. Tie your defaults to simple metrics that create feedback loops. If your deep work hours fall below 8 per week, cancel your lowest value recurring meetings. If your response times start slipping, adjust your communication batching schedule. Your defaults should be self-correcting, not self-defeating. Enforcement without apology. The hardest part of implementing defaults isn't creating them, it's enforcing them when people push back. And they will push back. People who are used to unlimited access to your time and attention won't appreciate the new boundaries. This is where most people fail. They apologize for their defaults, make exceptions just this once, or abandon the system when it creates temporary friction. This is exactly backwards. Your defaults aren't suggestions, they're policies. When someone asks you to violate them, you don't negotiate. You explain the policy, offer alternatives that work within your system, and hold firm. This isn't about being difficult, it's about being consistent. Offer one exception slot per week for truly urgent matters. This gives you flexibility while maintaining the integrity of your system. Most urgent requests aren't actually urgent, they're just poorly planned. When defaults become culture, in the first 2 weeks, you'll notice that your stress levels drop as decision fatigue decreases. You'll spend less mental energy on routine choices and more energy on strategic thinking. By week 4, something more significant happens. Other people start adapting to your defaults. They'll schedule meetings during your available windows. They'll send agendas in advance. They'll respect your communication preferences. Your personal defaults become the operating system for your professional relationships. At the 8-week mark, you'll experience what I call predictable throughput. Your major initiatives will advance consistently because your time and energy are protected. Your output will become more reliable because your inputs are more controlled. Most importantly, you'll develop what I call default confidence, the quiet certainty that comes from knowing your systems are working even when you're not actively managing them. Your defaults become invisible infrastructure that supports everything else you do. Maintaining your system. 3 challenges can undermine your default systems over time. First, pushback from others who want exceptions to your policies. Handle this by explaining the why behind your defaults and offering alternative solutions that work within your framework. Second, default creep, the gradual erosion of your standards as you make small compromises. Combat this with quarterly reviews where you delete 2 defaults that aren't serving you, refine 2 that need adjustment, and add 1 that addresses a new pattern. Third, self-sabotage when you're tempted to abandon your own policies. Prevent this by tracking your adherence to key defaults and sharing your commitment with an accountability partner or team. Your default systems become the foundation for the consistency protocols we'll explore next. But before we can build the unbreakable baseline that prevents 0 days and compounds progress over time, you need to understand something crucial about the relationship between identity and action. In the next chapter, we'll explore a counterintuitive truth about sustainable performance. The most consistent people don't rely on motivation or discipline. They've discovered something far more powerful that operates below the level of conscious choice. Chapter 8, Minimum Day. There's a secret hiding in plain sight on every successful person's calendar. It's not the big meetings, the important presentations, or the high-stakes negotiations that everyone can see. It's the small, seemingly insignificant blocks of time that appear day after day, week after week, year after year. These tiny commitments look unremarkable to outside observers, but they're actually the foundation that everything else is built on. Maya Angelou wrote her masterpieces in a bare hotel room with nothing but a Bible, a thesaurus, and a bottle of sherry. Every morning at 6:30 a.m., she'd arrive at the same room and write for exactly 3 hours. No phone, no distractions, no exceptions. Some days she'd produce pages of brilliant prose. Other days she'd write a single paragraph. But she showed up every single day. This chapter will teach you to build what I call your minimum viable day. A tiny, repeatable set of non-negotiables that you can hit even when everything else falls apart. This isn't about heroic effort or massive productivity. It's about creating an unbreakable baseline that prevents 0 days, preserves momentum, and builds the most powerful force in human psychology, identity. But first, let me show you why your current approach to consistency is doomed to fail. The 0-day trap. James was a marketing consultant with ambitious goals and impressive bursts of productivity. When he was on, he could work 12-hour days, produce brilliant strategies, and make significant progress on his biggest projects. The problem was that these heroic efforts were followed by inevitable crashes, days when he accomplished nothing meaningful at all. He called these his recovery days, but they were actually something more dangerous, 0 days. Days when his important work got 0 attention, 0 progress, 0 momentum. James didn't realize it, but these 0 days were costing him more than the productive days were gaining him. Here's why. Momentum dies exponentially, but it builds linearly. When you take a day off from your most important work, you don't just lose that day's progress, you lose the psychological momentum that makes the next day easier. When you take 2 days off, the restart cost becomes even higher. When you take a week off, you're essentially starting from scratch. James would spend Monday trying to remember where he'd left off the previous Friday. He'd spend Tuesday rebuilding the mental models he'd lost over the weekend. By Wednesday, he'd finally regain his rhythm, only to crash again by Friday. He was trapped in a cycle of heroic effort, followed by complete shutdown. The solution isn't working harder or longer. It's working more consistently, even if that means working less intensely. Small, steady progress beats sporadic heroics because it keeps the action loop unbroken. The identity secret. Here's what most people miss about consistency. It's not really about the work, it's about who you become. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you want to be. Every day you show up, you're reinforcing the identity of someone who shows up. Every day you skip, you're reinforcing the identity of someone who quits when things get difficult. This is what psychologists call the identity loop. Your actions shape your identity, and your identity shapes your actions. When you consistently do something, even something small, you start to see yourself as the type of person who does that thing. And once you see yourself that way, the behavior becomes automatic. Maya Angelou didn't write every day because she was a writer. She became a writer because she wrote every day. The daily practice created the identity, and the identity sustained the practice. This is why her minimum viable day was so powerful. It wasn't just about producing words, it was about becoming the person who always shows up to write. Your minimum viable day works the same way. It's not about the specific tasks you complete. It's about becoming the person who always does what they say they'll do, regardless of how they feel. This identity shift is what transforms motivation from a feeling into a fact. The compound power of small. There's a mathematical principle that most people intuitively understand but rarely apply. Compound interest. A small amount invested consistently over time becomes a fortune. A large amount invested sporadically becomes a disappointment. The same principle applies to your most important work. 30 minutes of focused effort every day for a year equals 182 hours of progress. That's more than 4 full work weeks of concentrated attention on your priority project. Most people never give their most important work 4 consecutive weeks of focus in their entire careers. But here's the part that makes this truly powerful. Those 182 hours aren't just additive, they're multiplicative. Each day's work builds on the previous day's insights. Each session starts where the last one ended. Each small step reveals the next small step. The compound effect isn't just about time, it's about accumulated understanding, refined skills, and deepening expertise. Compare this to the sporadic approach, working intensively for a few days, then taking weeks off, then trying to restart. You spend most of your energy remembering what you were doing instead of advancing what you're building. You never reach the flow state where real breakthroughs happen because you're always climbing back up to where you were before. The mythology of heroic effort. Before we build your minimum viable day, let's destroy 3 myths that might be sabotaging your consistency. Myth 1. Small doesn't matter. This is the delusion of people who mistake drama for progress. They believe that meaningful work requires massive effort, extended sessions, and heroic commitment. They're waiting for the perfect day when they can dedicate 8 uninterrupted hours to their priority project. The truth is more humble. Compounding is fueled by consistency, not spectacle. The writer who writes 200 words every day will finish more books than the writer who writes 2,000 words once a week. The entrepreneur who makes 1 sales call every day will build a bigger pipeline than the entrepreneur who makes 20 calls once a month. Small actions, repeated consistently, create results that look miraculous to outside observers but feel inevitable to the person doing the work. Myth 2. I'll double tomorrow. This is the bargaining that happens when you miss a day. You tell yourself you'll make up for today's missed session by doing twice as much tomorrow. You'll write 400 words instead of 200, make 2 sales calls instead of 1, work out for an hour instead of 30 minutes. The truth is more sobering. Debts of effort rarely get repaid. Tomorrow you'll face the same time constraints, energy limitations, and competing priorities that caused you to miss today. Plus, you'll have the additional burden of trying to do double work. The result is usually another missed day, followed by more bargaining, followed by abandoning the practice entirely. It's better to do the minimum consistently than to promise maximums you can't deliver. Myth 3. Streaks are gimmicks. This is the dismissal of people who think they're above simple tracking systems. They believe that sophisticated people shouldn't need to mark X's on calendars or count consecutive days of action. The truth is more practical. Streaks anchor identity and keep the action loop alive. When you have a visible streak, you're not just deciding whether to do today's work, you're deciding whether to break a chain that represents weeks or months of commitment. The streak becomes bigger than any individual day, and protecting it becomes more important than how you feel in the moment. Building your unbreakable baseline. Now comes the practical part. You're going to define 3 tiny non-negotiable actions that you can complete even on your worst days. These aren't aspirational goals. They're your absolute minimum, your safety net, your identity anchors. Each action should be tied to your North Star, but small enough to complete when you're operating at 20% energy. If your North Star involves building a business, your minimum might be making 1 prospecting call. If it involves writing a book, your minimum might be writing 100 words. If it involves getting healthier, your minimum might be a 10-minute walk. The key is making each action binary. Either you did it or you didn't. No partial credit, no gray areas, no negotiations. This eliminates the mental energy required to evaluate whether you've done enough and creates clear success criteria that you can track consistently. Write clear definitions for each action. Work on my business is too vague. Send 1 prospecting email to a qualified lead is specific. Exercise is too broad. Walk for 10 minutes outside is measurable. The more specific your definitions, the less mental energy you'll spend deciding what counts. The tracking system that works. Your streak tracker should be visible, simple, and impossible to ignore. Use a physical calendar on your wall or a single-line log in a notebook you see every day. Digital tracking can work, but physical tracking creates a stronger psychological connection to your streak. Mark each day immediately after completing your minimum. Don't wait until evening. The immediate feedback reinforces the behavior and gives you a small hit of satisfaction that makes the next day easier. Place your tracker where you make decisions about your day. Your bathroom mirror, your coffee station, your computer monitor, somewhere you can't avoid seeing it when you're tempted to skip. The visual reminder of your streak becomes a powerful motivator when willpower is low. Review your tracker weekly. If any action fails 3 times in 7 days, it's too ambitious for your current situation. Shrink it until you can hit it consistently, even on difficult days. Remember, the goal is consistency, not intensity. The recovery protocol. Here's the secret that makes your minimum viable day sustainable. Design for recovery, not perfection. When you inevitably miss a day, and you will, your response determines whether the miss becomes a slide or a quick course correction. If you miss your minimum, complete it first thing the next day. Not when you have time. Not when you feel motivated. Not after you've caught up on other things. First thing. This prevents the miss from becoming a pattern and reinforces your identity as someone who always gets back on track. Spend 5 minutes reflecting on why you missed. Was it a scheduling issue, an energy problem, a friction point you hadn't anticipated? Use this information to adjust your system, not to judge yourself. Misses are data, not failures. Celebrate the bounce back, not the miss. When you complete your minimum after missing a day, acknowledge that recovery. You're not just doing the work, you're proving to yourself that you're the type of person who doesn't stay down. Advanced minimum day techniques. Once you've established your basic minimum, you can implement techniques that make it even more powerful. Use the 2-minute start principle. Commit to just 2 minutes of each action. Often, starting is the hardest part, and momentum will carry you beyond the minimum. But if it doesn't, 2 minutes still counts as a win. Anchor your minimum to the same time and place every day. Habit formation is context dependent. The more consistent your environment, the more automatic your behavior becomes. If you always write at the same desk at the same time, your brain starts preparing for writing before you even sit down. Implement floor plus bonus thinking. Hit your minimum first, then consider adding extra if you have energy and time. This prevents the all-or-nothing thinking that destroys consistency. Some days you'll do the minimum, some days you'll do more. Both count as wins. When your minimum day starts working, in the first 2 weeks, you'll notice a measurable uptick in focus and follow-through. You'll start each day with a small win that creates momentum for everything else. Your confidence will increase because you're proving to yourself that you can do what you say you'll do. By the 2-month mark, you'll experience what I call identity lock-in. You'll start seeing yourself as the person who always shows up, regardless of circumstances. This identity shift makes the behavior feel automatic rather than effortful. At the 6-month mark, your minimum viable day will feel like breathing, natural, automatic, and essential. You'll have shipped meaningful work, built valuable momentum, and developed the most important skill in achievement, the ability to show up consistently, especially when you don't feel like it. Most importantly, you'll have created what I call anti-fragile consistency, a system that gets stronger under stress rather than weaker. Bad days won't derail you because your minimum is designed for bad days. Setbacks won't stop you because your system is built for recovery. Your minimum viable day becomes the foundation for everything else we've built together. But before we can integrate all these systems into a complete operating framework that scales with your ambitions, you need to understand something crucial about the relationship between systems and growth. In the next chapter, we'll explore how all these pieces fit together into something greater than the sum of their parts, and why the most successful people don't just build systems, they build systems that build other systems. Chapter 9, Keep Rising. You now possess something most people spend their entire careers searching for, a complete operating system for sustained high performance. Not tips, not hacks, not motivational platitudes that work for a week and fade by Friday. You have a machine, a systematic approach to motivation that works regardless of how you feel, what's happening around you, or how many times you've failed before. But here's what separates this moment from every other time you've learned something new. You're not just walking away with knowledge, you're walking away with architecture. The anti-vision switch isn't a concept you'll forget in a month. It's a framework that gets stronger the longer you use it. This final chapter will show you how all the pieces fit together into something greater than the sum of their parts. You'll see how this system expands your agency, sharpens your relationships, and unlocks outcomes that used to feel impossibly out of reach. Most importantly, you'll understand why the effort required to maintain this system actually decreases over time while the results compound exponentially. The machine you've built. Let's take a moment to appreciate what you've constructed. You started with the push-pull pairing, your North Star and anti-vision read daily, calibrated at a 70-30 ratio that provides direction without overwhelming urgency. This dual-engine system ensures you always have fuel for forward movement, whether you're feeling inspired or desperate. You built dual frames around that engine, a one-line North Star that selects your yeses and a never list that automates your nos. These visible rules converted your values from abstract ideals into concrete policies. Decisions that used to drain your mental energy now happen automatically. You installed early warning systems through premortems and backcasting. Instead of being surprised by predictable problems, you see failure before it happens and design specific counters. Instead of hoping your way to success, you map backward from clear outcomes to today's actions. You scripted your reflexes with anti-goals and if-then triggers. Your biggest derailers now activate automatic responses instead of derailing you entirely. You stop negotiating with yourself in moments of weakness because the negotiation happened during moments of strength. You redesigned your environment through friction engineering and defaults. Good behaviors became effortless. Bad behaviors became effortful. Your space now schedules your success instead of sabotaging it. Finally, you locked it all in with your minimum viable day. 3 non-negotiables that preserve momentum even when everything else falls apart. Your identity shifted from someone who tries to someone who does, regardless of circumstances. This isn't just a productivity system, it's a complete re-engineering of how motivation works in your life. The end of internal negotiation. Here's the first transformation you'll notice. You stop arguing with yourself. The internal debates that used to consume hours of mental energy simply disappear. Should you check social media during work hours? Your if-then script already decided. Should you accept that meeting without an agenda? Your never list already answered. Should you work on your priority project today? Your minimum viable day already committed. Pre-decisions replace moment of weakness negotiations. This isn't just more efficient, it's psychologically liberating. You're no longer constantly choosing between your current self and your future self. Your systems have aligned them. The result is what I call calm intensity. The ability to work with focused energy without the underlying anxiety that comes from constantly second-guessing your choices. You know you're working on the right things because your system ensures it. You know you're protected from distractions because your environment prevents them. You know you'll show up tomorrow because your minimum day guarantees it. This calm intensity becomes your new baseline. Instead of cycling between manic productivity and guilty procrastination, you operate from a steady state of purposeful action. The relationship revolution. Something unexpected happens when you implement these systems. Your relationships improve dramatically. Not because you're trying to be a better person, but because you've become more predictable and reliable. When you have clear boundaries, people know how to work with you. When you have consistent availability windows, colleagues can plan around your schedule. When you do what you say you'll do, trust builds automatically. When you say no to things that don't align with your priorities, your yeses carry more weight. Your never list handles the no so you can handle the relationship. Instead of agonizing over each request, you simply refer to your published policies. This removes the personal element from boundary enforcement and makes it easier for others to respect your limits. People start seeing you as someone who has their act together. They stop bringing you their chaos because they know you won't absorb it. They start bringing you their best opportunities because they know you'll execute on them. Most importantly, you stop being a source of stress for others. When people know they can count on you to deliver what you promise, when you promise it, their own stress levels decrease. Reliability is a gift you give to everyone around you. The compound advantage. Here's where the system becomes truly powerful. The longer you run it, the less effort it requires and the better it works. This is the opposite of most approaches to productivity, which require constant energy to maintain. Your habits become identity, and identity becomes autopilot. The more you execute your minimum viable day, the more you see yourself as someone who always shows up. The more you see yourself that way, the more automatic the showing up becomes. Eventually, not doing your minimum feels stranger than doing it. Your wins start stacking. Each successful project builds your reputation. Each kept commitment builds trust. Each boundary enforced builds respect. Each system refined builds capability. The compound effect isn't just about time, it's about accumulated credibility, refined judgment, and expanding opportunities. Your decision-making improves because you're making fewer decisions. Your defaults and tripwires handle the routine choices, freeing your cognitive capacity for the rare, high-stakes decisions that actually matter. When you do need to choose, you choose better because you're not mentally exhausted from 1,000 micro-decisions. Risk shrinks as your systems mature. You're no longer surprised by predictable problems because your premortems caught them early. You're no longer derailed by known weaknesses because your anti-goals scripted responses. You're no longer overwhelmed by competing priorities because your dual frames sorted them automatically. Courage grows as confidence compounds. When you know your systems work, you can take bigger risks because you trust your ability to execute. When you know you'll show up consistently, you can make longer-term commitments. When you know you can recover from setbacks, you can attempt more ambitious projects. the Bezos blueprint in action. Jeff Bezos exemplifies what happens when these principles operate at scale. His anti-vision, avoiding lifelong regret of not building something meaningful, drove him to leave a comfortable Wall Street job to start Amazon. His vision provided clear direction for each initiative, with press release first backcasting that clarified desired outcomes before work began. His defaults created the culture that scaled. Memo-driven meetings that forced clear thinking, protected time for reading and reflection, working backwards from customer needs rather than forward from company capabilities. These weren't just personal productivity techniques. They became the operating system for one of the world's most valuable companies. The results speak for themselves. Amazon didn't succeed because Bezos worked harder than other entrepreneurs. It succeeded because he built systems that made the right choices automatic, the right behaviors effortless, and the right outcomes inevitable. Your anti-vision switch operates on the same principles. The scale might be different, but the mechanics are identical. Clear floors and ceilings, systematic risk management, environmental design, and unbreakable baselines that compound over time. Your next move. You have everything you need. The question isn't whether this system works. You've seen the evidence. The question isn't whether you're capable of implementing it. The steps are clear and manageable. The only question is whether you'll start. Here's your immediate action sequence. Right now, before you close this book, write your one-line North Star and post it where you make decisions. Write your 5-item never list and put it next to your North Star. These 2 artifacts will change your week immediately. Tomorrow morning, before you check email or social media, complete your first minimum viable day. Block 3 small, non-negotiable actions on your calendar and execute them before anything else. This isn't about perfection. It's about proving to yourself that you're the type of person who does what they say they'll do. This week, script one if-then response to your biggest derailer. Identify the trigger, write the automatic response, and post it where the failure usually happens. Watch how quickly your response time improves when you're not deciding in the moment. This month, implement your full system. Add friction to temptations, remove friction from priorities, establish your defaults, and protect your minimum day. Adjust based on what you learn, but don't abandon the framework. The person you're becoming. Here's the final truth I want you to understand. This isn't really about productivity. It's about becoming the person you've always known you could be. You've always had the potential for sustained high performance. You've always had the capacity for meaningful achievement. You've always had the ability to do what you say you'll do. What you've lacked isn't talent or intelligence or opportunity. You've lacked systems that make your best self inevitable instead of accidental. The anti-vision switch doesn't change who you are. It reveals who you are by removing the friction, confusion, and inconsistency that have been hiding your true capabilities. 6 months from now, when you're shipping projects on schedule, saying no without guilt, and making big moves without drama, remember this moment. Remember that you had everything you needed to succeed. You just needed to flip the switch. Your future self is watching. They're counting on you to make the choice that creates the life they get to inherit. They're hoping you'll start small, start today, and start before you feel ready. Pick your floor, guard it fiercely, rise from there. No heroics required, no drama necessary, just the person you decided to become, starting now. The switch is in your hands. The only question left is whether you'll flip it. Your transformation begins the moment you do.